Welcome back to Your Legacy Radio. Excited to be with you. Welcome back. What I want to do is to give out that number one more time for River Wealth Solutions. We've had some individuals say, you know what, you give out that number too quickly. I'd love to have it, love to get more information about what River Wealth Solutions can do for me as far as helping me identify assets that I currently have, turning those into funds that I need, especially that process of what's called a living resource benefit, taking your life insurance policy that you no longer need or cannot afford and transferring that into funds that you need for whatever illness you might be affected with, or just to live life. Maybe it's for retirement. Maybe it's not even for an illness at all. Maybe you're fairly healthy. You just want the capital now. You want the funds now to live the life that you want to live. And the other side of it is maybe you can't afford that policy anymore. So the number to reach River Wealth Solutions is 866-500-2922. The number one more time is 866-500-2922. And as I promised, I've got David Shenk on the phone with me. David is an award-winning author, commentator for many different publications as well as networks and TV shows. He's written books such as The Genius in All of Us, The Forgetting, Data Smog, The Immortal Game. So many things you've kind of ventured into, Mr. Shenk, and it's great to have you on the show with us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, tell the audience, and you and I talked earlier about some of this, but tell the audience as far as, I guess we'll start with being an author. What's your passion? What's your drive as far as being an author, being a commentator? What kind of pushed you into that realm of a career?
Well, you're talking to a very lucky guy, because in high school I fell in love with reading and specifically reading nonfiction, and even more specifically what I call literary nonfiction. So the great nonfiction writers who write nonfiction as well as some of the great novels are written. So we're talking about people like Tom Wolfe and Joan Didion and John McPhee. And I just wanted to do that.
Yeah.
And I was pretty single-minded about it. I studied that in college along with some other things. And basically what that means is my job is to explore things that I'm curious about and to turn them into articles and books. And I've just been lucky enough to kind of jump from one curiosity to another. And I think the reason we're talking right now is that one of my books is called The Forgetting, and it's about Alzheimer's disease. And that was most of my books are something I spend a couple years on and then move on to a different topic. But with Alzheimer's, once you start exploring that community, it's a part of you. You never leave it. So I subsequently have just become very involved in giving talks and raising money for research, and I make films about Alzheimer's, and it's unfortunately a very, very important thing to talk about.
Absolutely. I was just talking in the first segment as far as Alzheimer's, as well as, diseases like ALS. We met with a chapter in North Carolina that has support groups all across North Carolina, but supports South Carolina and Georgia and Tennessee and Virginia. And they said the biggest thing we need is awareness. And I think the same thing with Alzheimer's as well, that, there's yes, it's been a disease. It's definitely horrible, and it hits so many, not just the individuals that are affected by the disease, but all of the individuals who surround them. But there still is a big problem with lack of awareness of the disease. Is that what you've seen in your articles and your books as well?
Yeah, I mean, I have, unfortunately. It's staggering. Everyone actually has heard of Alzheimer's. Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to find a person who hasn't heard the term and doesn't know that it's, a terrible disease that mostly old people deal with, and they don't want to hear anything more about it. They know it has something to do with memories, losing your memories.
Right.
But I think not too many people who aren't facing it directly know just how staggering the numbers are. We're up to over 5 million Americans who have the disease, which means tens of millions of Americans who are related, closely related to someone who has the disease. We're talking about a disease that after diagnosis lasts on average about 10 or 15 years. So, and it's very, very, it's what they call insidious. Mm-hmm. It's a progressive disease that moves very, very slowly. We have absolutely no real treatment in terms of stopping or even slowing down the disease yet. And it is a fatal disease, although a lot of people sadly die of something of a complication before they get to the end stages. So it's just a massive, massive disease, and it's affecting more and more of us. And because it affects, generally speaking, about 90 or 95% of the cases are in the elderly, and we all know that we're all living longer, that we've been able to raise the longevity. This is the paradox of being able to improve longevity in the 20th and 21st century, is that now we have so many more people who are going to get this disease, and we're really not paying enough attention to it on a national and international level.
Right. And that's a lot of what you go into with living with Alzheimer's, and then you've got the documentary as well. Talk about the documentary and how that came about. I know the book was first, then the documentary. How did all that come together as far as the documentary, and what have you seen as far as the effects of creating that awareness with the documentary?
Right. Well, people are hungry to know more about this disease, and there's a lot of things to talk about. So there's just general understanding that people need to have. What is this disease? How does it work? What's going on? How do we deal with it as a family? And to answer some of those questions, I made 5 short animated films. They're at aboutalz.org, and those answer some very specific questions about what the disease is. After that, I was able to start a new project called Living with Alzheimer's, which you mentioned, which is about making short live-action documentaries about the experience of the disease. And we were able to recruit 4 extraordinary film directors to make each about a 10-minute film about the disease, and those have now gone on to appear at film festivals. Mm-hmm. And the really exciting thing now is that we have turned that into an online film contest. So anyone with a camera who has a story to tell about their own family can make their own film and enter it into our contest. We'll show it to everyone out there if the quality is passable. And we'll each year we're going to be giving out actually a cash prize to the best film entered into our contest. So this is about people sharing their stories and relating their family experience.
What are some of the comments that you hear from fans as far as how these things have affected them? Just you bringing awareness to the disease.
Well, this is another reason why I've spent so much time in this area. It's a very selfish thing, frankly, because you get so much amazing feedback. People are so desperate to learn more about the disease, to hear some of the details, that they're very grateful. So I hear from people almost every day about some of the films and some of the writing I've done. I also am very lucky and honored to be associated with an amazing consortium of scientists, of researchers called the Cure Alzheimer's Fund. It's headed by Rudy Tanzi, who's a legendary geneticist at Harvard, and he's brought together about 24 of the best Alzheimer's scientists in the world, and we raise money for them privately because, frankly, the federal government does not spend anywhere near the money they should be spending on curing this disease. So we're up to raising about $10 or $11 million a year, and hopefully that's climbing, and we put the money very, very quickly and swiftly and efficiently into cutting-edge research. It's these researchers getting together a couple times a year saying, okay, well, here's what we know. How can we take the ball down the road, down the field another 10 yards?
Right.
And so that's just a very gratifying thing to be a part of.
Right. Well, listen, I have a number of other things I want to get into with you, and we'll jump into that in this next segment. A lot of great information, and that's something that I see in so many different areas that deal with terminally ill diseases is the lack of knowledge, but then the lack of funding to help fight these diseases and help come up with a cure. So many of these diseases don't have cures, and it's just
yes, indeed.
It's amazing. I mean, it's unbelievable. All the money that seems to be floating around in all the other areas, not to direct funds to something like Alzheimer's or ALS or dementia. It's just it doesn't make sense to me. I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes as far as where all the money's spent. But that's a whole different subject that we don't have time to get into. So anyway, we'll be right back. We'll get into some of this other stuff in the next segment. So it's so great to have you on the show. If you want more information about River Wealth Solutions, or you think River Wealth Solutions can help you to identify assets that can create funds for you, call them directly at 866-500-2922. We'll be right back with more of Your Legacy Radio right after this. Welcome back to Your Legacy Radio. The sole sponsor, as I said before, of Your Legacy Radio is River Wealth Solutions. And I want to give out that contact number for River Wealth Solutions a couple more times, because the thing that I've seen within this show that we've had so far, and the show is fairly new on the airwaves of News Talk 1110 WBT and on WBT.com, is the fact that we've had a lot of individuals calling in with questions, calling in with concerns, calling in with things that they want help with, and just with overall questions as to what River Wealth Solutions can do in order of helping them manage their finances, get their financial situation under control, be it a will, be it a living will, be it a power of attorney, putting capital into a fund that's protected, a guaranteed indexed account, be it taking insurance policies and actually creating funds from those insurance policies to be used for medical care, to pay facilities directly so that you have a tax benefit and setting up an account that pays these facilities directly. And it's simply taking a life insurance policy called a living resource benefit, creating funds from a policy that you have that you no longer need. You don't want to pay the premiums anymore. Maybe you can't afford the premiums anymore. Taking that policy and turning that policy into funds that you currently need now. Living the life that you want to live with those funds, opposed to leaving those funds when you leave this earth. But a lot of times you can still take that policy and create a death benefit with it and get the funds out of the policy. So there's been a lot of questions coming in over the past few weeks as far as how to do that, what it looks like, how can I create that with the type of policy I have, how much money can I get for my policy, all those different things that come up when that thought process starts. If you want more information about that or anything else that River Wealth Solutions does, you can reach them directly at 866-500-2922. That's 866-500-2922. And we're on the line with David Shenk. It's great to have him on. We covered a lot of ground in the last segment, but I've got a lot of other things that I want to dive into. One thing, David, I want to circle back around to is the Cure for Alzheimer's Fund that you work with so closely. How can individuals reach that fund as far as support, be it through physical work or to donate money to that fund? How can they reach out to that fund?
Yeah, we'd be very grateful for any support. Of course, really what we're after is money, frankly, because we want to put all the money we can just directly into research. And let me just say one really exciting thing about how the fund is structured. It was set up by a couple of very wealthy families who wanted to give back to the world. Mm. And what they do is they cover all the administrative expenses. So what that means is any listeners who give $1 or $50 or $100 to this fund, that's every single penny they give is going to go directly to research. There's going to be absolutely not one single penny that gets diverted to pay me, for example, or the CEO or any of the other staff, because our expenses are all taken care of by this board of very generous people. So the answer to your question is to go to curealz.org. That's curealz.org, and you'll learn everything you can possibly want to know about our amazing consortium of scientists. And really, all at its heart, really what this is a group of really many of the leading Alzheimer's scientists in the world who have come together as a group and get together, and they get money from lots of different places, of course, including lots of federal funding. But from us, they get some additional private funding to really push the envelope and move towards a cure as fast as we possibly can.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as far as being a senior advisor for that organization, what are some of the things that you take on for the organization in that role?
It's a really good partnership. My job is I'm not a scientist. I'm not an MD. I'm quote unquote just a writer. I'm a communicator, and my job is to learn about complicated, important things. In this case, Alzheimer's disease, and really communicate what I learned to non-scientists like myself. So I've done that through my book and my films and my lectures, and so it's a great partnership with Cure Alzheimer's Fund because they've got a lot of really, really smart scientists. And they're doing a lot of really important work, and I'm able to help communicate what they do to the public. So I write articles about the scientists, for our quarterly report. I interview them frequently through these webinars. And what we do is my portion of this is to try to take all the very technical stuff that they're doing and explain it as best we can together to a general non-scientific audience, so they get a little taste of what we actually do. And I'm lucky enough to be kind of that mediator and to see all the exciting work that these wonderful scientists do for us.
Absolutely. You've done so many things within the realm of Alzheimer's, and you've gotten so close to the disease as an author and as a brilliant writer that you are in all these publications and books and documentaries and things that you've done. How has that affected you personally? I mean, what has the effect been on you in getting that close to this awful disease?
There's a lot of emotional stuff that goes on. It's a very, very sad and tragic disease. I've gotten to know an awful lot of people who have had the disease, and also a lot of family members who've lost their loved ones. I would say to kind of bring it down to its essence, the lesson is that I guess there are two things that I come away with. One is there is an urgency, which you've already heard me talk about, that we're just not doing enough to cure this disease. And we're talking about millions and millions of lives. And that, just imagine a graph with that line going almost straight up, because the numbers are increasing so dramatically every single year. We're really headed to kind of epidemic levels of this disease. And the other thing is frankly, just as a human being, as a middle-aged guy, it helps me every moment that I spend communicating about this disease and talking to people who deal with it. It helps me appreciate the fragility of life. And while that's a very sad thing, it's also frankly, a very beautiful thing, because you're constantly reminded of how precious life is, of what you want to hang on to if you can, of how important certain individuals are to you, and it helps you kind of push away the useless, dumb distractions and hoopla in life, and just kind of helps you remind you what's really most important to yourself.
Right. Life is short, and things, and that's one of the things that I've benefited from in being a part of Riverwell Solutions, is to meet with individuals that are affected by a terminal illness, and it does give you a whole different perspective. That every day, every breath, is so such a blessing, and if you don't look at life in that way, you don't know when that time's going to come when you might be affected with something like Alzheimer's or dementia or ALS, and then there's a lot of other things out there, so I don't have time to name everything, but there's, it's just every step has a purpose, and you've put so much into the work that you've put out there, and I know it has to have affected the families in such a positive way. When you meet with the families and when you meet with the individuals that are affected by this horrible disease, what would you say is the most needed thing? And we may have already covered it, but what would you say is the most needed thing that they say to you that they hope occurs within awareness or within just your work in the disease? What is the most needed thing by them, do you think?
Well, there are a couple of real strong basic needs. One is the people who don't understand the disease. This is not like cancer. Cancer, you get diagnosed with cancer, and it's horrible, of course, but you understand what that is. You have cancer of this certain part of your body. That's a growth of cells that's out of control, and that's unfortunately threatening to spread throughout your body. A 5-year-old could understand that. Right. Alzheimer's disease is a disease you can experience as a family member for years and years and still not understand it at all. So there's just a basic understanding, and that's why I did the series of videos that I talked about before. And the second thing is that people just need all sorts of basic care. They just we're talking about people who start out just like you and me, very ordinary individuals who just have a kind of a little bit of a memory problem, but then that progresses, and they wind up after years and years really being almost completely dependent on others for their daily lives, to help them eat and dress and take their medicines and all that. And so there's just a lot of some people are lucky enough to afford that kind of care, and a lot of people aren't. So
Yeah.
So that's just a constant need that I just see all the time, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. How close, with all of your work and with the closeness that you have within the disease, how close to a cure do you think we are?
Well, we're closer than we've ever been, for sure.
Yeah.
I've now been studying this field for about 15 years, or really more like 17 years, and it's had its ups and downs. And part of it has to do, frankly, with just the dearth of federal funding. We just haven't had the money in this disease that we needed. But we're in an upswing now, thanks to people at Cure Alzheimer's Fund and a lot of other wonderful scientists, I have to say, that aren't a part of our group. We really have made some tremendous breakthroughs in the last couple of years where we understand the basic mechanisms of the disease. We're learning a lot through the genetics. We're learning a lot about how the disease unfolds and where it comes from. It's not as simple as just kind of being caused by a certain gene or by any one particular environmental aspect. Unfortunately, it's a lot more complicated than that. Mm-hmm. Really, the biggest risk factor is age. Mm. But we do understand a lot more about it now, and there's some really, really exciting work that we don't really have time or technical ability to go into, but a lot of really exciting work on trying to come up with just the right drug or suite of drugs. And I'm very hopeful that in the next handful of years, there's going to be something that at least hopefully starts to slow down at least the very earliest stages of the disease. And then we'll have to move to a better diagnostic tools, which are already, there's a lot of research going on in that field as well. So we made a lot of progress, but we're really, really desperate for more funding and more political attention, because we're not going to get there fast enough if we don't have that.
Absolutely. And I'll say the website one more time. If you want to give some money to Cure Alzheimer's Fund, you can do that at curealz.org. That's cure, curealz.org. And Google David Shenk. Is David, Shenk. Look at all of his books, all of his articles, Get the Forgetting, some amazing work that he has put into place, and it will enlighten you as to the things that exist out there, especially around this disease, but a lot of other topics that he's written so brilliantly about. David, it's been great to have you on the show with me. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Anytime, and thanks so much for everything that you're doing.
Absolutely. You take care. Thank you.
You too.
If you want more information about an organization called River Wealth Solutions, or if you want more information about the information that I gave out, you can call River Wealth and they can give you that. If you want to understand how to take assets you have, turn those assets into cash that you need for a disease that you're suffering with or you're affected by right now, call them directly, 866-500-2922. That's 866-500-2922. When we get back, I want to do a recap of everything we've talked about, which is a lot on the show up to this point. We'll cover ALS, we'll cover the David Shenk interview, and we'll cover Alzheimer's and the effects that all of those diseases have on individuals. We'll be right back with more of Your Legacy Radio right after this.